Imagine for a moment that you, like myself, are a passionate gamer. And let's just say that you have a hard-headed and judgmental uncle. Let's call him Uncle Jack. Now, quick disclosure, Uncle Jack is a fictional character and any likeness or resemblance to a real person is purely coincidental.
Everybody got that? Good!
Uncle Jack is the type of guy to shamelessly poke fun at you and other gamers. He might call you a really mean name, such as a nerd or a loser. My goodness. Or he might make some jokes about how you spend your life living in your parents' basement, wearing nothing but your boxer shorts, and they probably have pockets in them or something like that, and that you also wear a propeller cap. Finally, he'll likely go for the kill shot by saying that you'll never get a girlfriend. It's worth noting that this last stereotype, which is typically geared toward men and boys, completely ignores the fact that girls can obviously be nerds and losers too. Uncle Jack, and I think it's fair to say that society as a whole, generally views us gamers in this way. To make mention of a quick example, consider the movie Zombieland, which is worth watching if you haven't seen it, by the way. The main character, Dweebatron or Nerdzilla, I forget his name, Darth Virgin, perhaps, but anyways, in the beginning of the movie, he shares with the audience a glance into his former pre-apocalyptic life as an introverted gamer. He describes how he never goes outside, he spends his Friday nights playing World of Warcraft while a leaning tower of pizza boxes sits next to his computer monitor, and he's always drinking Mountain Dew, Code Red, of course, but like yada yada, you get the idea. This stereotype obviously comes as shock to no one at all. The reason why is because it is so widespread. While Uncle Jack himself is fictional, most gamers could likely relate him to somebody that they know. A family member, a friend, or maybe a coworker. You see, Uncle Jack is a metaphor. He is a stand-in adversary for me to argue against in order to illustrate a point. I created this Uncle Jack character as a personification of a broader societal stigma toward gamers. So why does this stigma, these stereotypes, why are they so prevalent? And are these criticisms justified? I think these are good questions and worth looking into, especially when we gamers and Uncle Jack may actually have far more in common with each other than either side realizes. Now, I'm not bitter or butthurt by this caricature of gamers like myself. In fact, I'd actually kind of agree, at least in part. As I'll discuss further in depth momentarily, I think that video games can be a truly insightful art form. But we as gamers, I believe, have made a critical mistake. We seem to have built this culture that embraces some of the more superficial aspects of gaming, thus earning us this reputation imposed by the Uncle Jacks of the world. So, join me as I unpack both sides of this super controversial issue, and my conclusion may surprise you. I'm Shawn from Pod Gaming, and thank you for joining me today as we discuss the philosophy of gaming. The first point I want to address is the claim that playing video games is a complete waste of time. This is not my claim, this is Uncle Jack's claim. Have you not heard your own Uncle Jack say things like this? Say things like, you should focus your time on something productive, or why are you wasting your life on those dumb games? Never mind the fact that Uncle Jack wastes his own time by watching TV or scrolling through social media though, right? So let's compare these activities that we recognize as time wasters. If we were to try to classify gaming into a particular category, I would say that that category would be content-based entertainment. Video games share this category with book reading and the aforementioned film, which includes TV and movies, and social media. These four activities are your typical time wasters. It's worth mentioning that there is a distinction between content-based entertainment and a hobby. Now, while both are activities that we engage in during leisure time, they still aren't quite the same. When I think of a hobby, I like to think of things like woodworking or writing, painting, gardening, perhaps knitting, and the like. You see, these activities are professions in their own right. They are skills that other people do make a living on, yet one may participate in the activity simply for fun or pleasure. Reading a book, watching TV, or scrolling through social media do not fall into this category, but funnily enough, in the modern age, playing video games is more and more trending towards this hobby category, as people do in fact make a living by doing nothing else other than playing video games. You've heard of professional gamers, but when was the last time you've heard of a professional book reader or a professional movie watcher? While those activities are lucrative industries, people don't make a career out of merely consuming the content. But gamers are different, especially today. On this basis alone, playing video games seems to be less of a time waster than the other activities comparatively. But this isn't the only argument I have to counter Uncle Jack's claim. Next, let's compare the pros and cons of how we directly engage with the 4 forms of content-based entertainment, which again are books, film, social media, and gaming. First, there's one con or negative attribute that all of these share. They are physically idle activities, meaning that whenever you read a book, watch TV, play video games, or scroll through social media, you're typically sitting in a chair or a couch, or even laying in bed. They require almost no effort or energy expended to participate. Simply put, these are all lazy activities. But let's break down these even further, starting with book reading. While it's not physically demanding, reading demands a great deal of mental engagement. Reading, by its very nature, stimulates the consumer intellectually. When you read, you directly develop and expand your vocabulary, your sense of grammar, and you open up your mind to the different styles of writing and language conveyed by the author. Books, whether a fictional novel or a piece of nonfiction work, build knowledge. Now, this is all pretty obvious, which is why you don't see reading heavily criticized by the Uncle Jack types. And I am not criticizing it either. As far as content-based entertainment goes, reading is one of the better and healthier options. Now for social media. Look, social media has obvious and direct links to generating addiction and despair to its users. And I can do an entire monologue on this issue alone, but that's a topic that I will save for another time in a later video. For the purposes of today's topic, however, just note that social media is really bad. This should require no explanation as to why, but I don't see much of a stigma attached to it, especially from the Uncle Jacks out there. Are they not among the masses of folks who live their life through their phones? Go to any restaurant and just observe the amount of people with their faces and their phone at the table. It's an epidemic for sure, but everyone does it, so no one criticizes it. This now leaves us with TV and movies. I'm kind of lumping the two together, and video games. These are quite similar in that they both involve you to sit on the couch and stare at a screen. They would both seem to be a waste of time, right? But Uncle Jack doesn't rag on watching TV like he does about gaming, now does he? This is attributed to the fact that he, like everyone, does it. Watching TV, I mean. But wait, playing video games, kind of like reading, is quite mentally engaging. By playing video games, the gamer builds dexterity and hand-eye coordination. The gamer must also exercise their decision-making skills, as action and consequence are an inherent part of video games. In this way, there are direct benefits to be gained from playing video games, even if those benefits are relatively small. So what benefit is to be gained from watching TV exactly? I mean, sure, there is such a thing as educational content on TV, but that, believe it or not, exists in gaming too. So again, what unique benefit is there in watching TV? None? Is it not true that watching TV is the most physically and mentally stagnant option? One can simply be in a state of insomnia while watching TV. It's mind-numbing. It's zombifying. Of course, Uncle Jack would never say that because he would have to pass judgment on himself, which he won't do. So, on the basis of time-wasting activities, video games seems like the most stigmatized but deserves the least stigma comparatively, except for maybe reading. But we're not done quite yet. There's another point that I want to make. So let's take a different approach on how we look at our 4 forms of content-based entertainment. I want to examine them through an artistic lens. But first, let me define what art is. My definition of art, and I'm willing to bet that my definition is actually really close to the actual definition. But my definition of art is a beautiful creation that depicts nature. Now, art by this meaning exists in many forms. For example, a Bob Ross painting is quite literally a beautiful physical creation that depicts nature. Nature as we typically think of it, in the form of wilderness, trees and mountains, streams and snow.
I will shake it off and then just beat the devil out of it.
But the most common, and in my opinion, the most profound depiction of nature in art is when the artist depicts human nature. You see this in Shakespeare, for example. Shakespeare's insight of human nature and how he channeled it into his writing is what made him the best writer, certainly of his time, but possibly of all time. I mean, his work is still taught in school today, even though he died, some 300-400 years ago? Let me give one more example. Consider the movie Avatar by James Cameron. I'm sure you've heard of it. The movie expresses both nature in the wilderness form, like Bob Ross, and human nature, like Shakespeare. The movie captures the wonder of the audience with stunning visuals and beautiful scenery. The movie is also quite explicit in its messaging about how that kind of nature ought to be preserved. Avatar also heavily emphasizes human nature as well, specifically human greed. The movie directly pits human greed and natural beauty in this epic and deadly conflict. Now that is good art. So, now that I'm done with my somewhat long tangent about art, it's time to tie our 4 forms of content-based entertainment back into the discussion. Real quick, social media is now completely irrelevant to the topic at hand because it is obviously not art, like at all. So just throw that right out the window. It's gone. So this leaves us with the other 3, books and TV shows / movies, and games. Now these things are quite similar in that they are all narrative-driven art forms. A good author, film producer, or game developer respectively, can pull their audience into a beautiful fantasy world. They all create inspirational heroes and dreadful villains. A good book can be captivating. A great movie can be captivating. And yes, a great video game can also be captivating. But I'm here to tell you why I think that video games are superior. And this leads me to my final point in defending video games against Uncle Jack's criticism. Imagine that you're watching a Resident Evil movie. There is your favorite character running away from zombies, low on ammo. He can meet his unfortunate demise in just a mere instant. You can feel the suspense. You can feel the fear. Books have a similar effect, but rather watching it, you must envision it. Sometimes this can amplify the emotions even more because books can kind of play on the imagination quite intensely. But in a video game, you're not merely watching a character running for his life, low on ammo. You are that character running for your life while you are low on ammo. Your decisions or skill directly impact the success or failure of that character. This adds a heightened level of emotion to the experience. It adds a level of immersion. In video games, the relationship between content and the consumer is far more blended compared to books and film. This is, however, a double-edged sword. This is where Uncle Jack actually has a legitimate point against gamers. The level of immersion, the satisfaction of success, or the drive to overcome failure can be quite consuming to us gamers. So much so that in some cases, folks that play video games become addicted to the games that they play. They allow the fantasy worlds to overwrite the real world. They prioritize life to revolve around the game, whether they mean to or not. That is why it's important that we gamers and our passion for gaming appreciate video games as the beautiful art form that it is. No more and no less. And that's it. That about does it for all the points that I want to make to counter the arguments of Uncle Jack. In summary, video games are overstigmatized and underappreciated by the general society. But video games, like all the other pleasures that life has to offer, is best enjoyed in moderation. This particular topic of discussion is something that I've thought an awful lot about. In fact, when I first propositioned the idea of starting a gaming channel to Marshall, This is the monologue that I pitched to him. It stands as the foundation of what we want to do here at the Philosophy of Gaming. We want to create content that emphasizes our passion for gaming as an art in the content that we bring. Our intention is to start a movement, to create a community that brings us together on this foundation. We want to spark deeper conversation with you about our favorite games. We want to shift the gaming culture away from talking about our KD ratios or the achievements that we've unlocked and embrace something more substantial. And we here at POG are just getting started. I'm Shawn, and thank you for lending me your ear today. And we'll see you in the next video where we will continue to discuss the philosophy of gaming.